This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
All right, I will call to order this meeting of the Easthampton Planning Board for Tuesday, July 1st, 2025. We are recording the meeting. First item on the agenda, public speak. Is there anyone who would like to speak to anything that is not on the agenda tonight? We've
got one person on the line. If you'd like to speak to something not on the agenda, please raise your hand and I will go ahead and allow you to speak. Seeing a hand up. So.
All right, moving right along, we have a public hearing for James Crawford, site plan approval pursuant to table 5.1 and section 12.9 of the zoning ordinance. Applicant is seeking to operate a karaoke establishment under the indoor amusement and recreation service. The property is located in the downtown business district at 25 Cottage. There. Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
Name and address, please, and let us know what's going on.
Sure. James Crawford. The business address is 24 Cottage Street. And yeah, so I'll just run down here. So I am opening a karaoke business. The 24 Cottage Street space has previously been a retail store, a music store up until recently. So I am currently renting the space, and I am asking for a special permit to run as a indoor amusement and recreation service. So that is use number 40. The business is just going to be 4 private karaoke rooms. I will design them to be acoustically treated. People can go into the rooms and rent them hourly. I'll have karaoke like mics and TVs, speakers, lights, couches. So there's no liquor license or anything associated. It's going to be just hourly renting of rooms. So do you want me to run?
Or are people bringing their own food and drinks, or is it just?
Yes, it will be BYOB.
Okay.
Yes. I will also be selling non-alcoholic drinks and snacks.
Okay.
But that's the gist of it. Would you like me to? Yeah.
Yeah, no, please.
Hi. A few questions and then I'll just jump in. That was the old rhythm section, yeah?
It is, yes.
Disappointing to see that's gone, but exciting to hear that a new business is coming in. You'll be renovating that space, building it out to make rooms, is that correct? Because I remember it being a large open space with some room behind. So
yes, there will be
built out.
A lot of renovation. Yes.
Okay. Yes. What hours are you considering?
So I'm looking at weekdays like 3 to 11, weekend 3 until 1 a.m. or so.
And you said that you were going to be providing some beverages. You'd be putting I know there's independent rooms. Is there like a fridge in every room, or are you?
No, it'll just be like the check-in areas where I am. I'll have a larger refrigerator so people can come out of the room and get a drink at any time. But it will just be like stocked in a refrigerator.
How many staff are you?
It's really a one at a time kind of thing. I'm probably going to hire part-time just to help me out. Be open about 40 hours a week though.
And then my last question. Are you going to do any sound mitigation in any of those rooms?
A lot, yeah. And with the neighboring spaces, I will be working with a company in Northampton, but they do, mitigation and put up sound treatment in between the drywall. So yes, between the rooms and along with the other walls with the other businesses, because they are kind of paper thin. So
Have you talked to any of those neighbors about this?
Yes, yes, I've met the neighbors, and there's not a lot of overlap with their times. Yep. So that's great. But I have, spoken to them about how I will be treating the walls and everything. So
And I'm trying to think, there's no apartments above the building, right?
No.
It's just the one floor. Okay.
For me, point of curiosity would be to know what that treatment is going to be. That seems to me that if there was going to be something contentious about this, by the way, I love karaoke personally. Don't ask me my go-to song, but it would be obviously right for something like this. So, as a board, I love that you're saying you're going to do something about it, but I kind of wish I had something more to go with, like exactly what are you going to do and what's the efficacy. I would love to know, for example, what the intended value. That's what I'm not claiming to be an expert, but just so we had something in the record, and so the public that's watching, which really is one person, correct? But it's on our public TV station for record. Those that watch this would know what it is we're agreeing to, so that if it gets up over 100 decibels, we at least looked. Just saying.
yeah, it's very.
It's been next week.
Like I said, I'm going to be working with this AV company out of Northampton. So that's something that they will definitely take into account. And the karaoke can be loud, but it's not 100 decibels. I'm not going to be having the speaker set to anything that's going to be hurting people's ears within the space. The software that I'm planning to use has a maximum volume that you can set as the owner, that the people using the room can't just turn the dial to whatever they feel like. So I can kind of tune it to whatever I feel is like an appropriate volume and not go beyond it. I can't keep people from screaming, but but yes, there's so like a high density vinyl rubber thing that you can hang in between drywall. So there's a couple other like layers of things. There's some like metal brackets that kind of disconnect the drywall from the 2x4s or whatever, so that you aren't getting that like the base transfer through the wall. So there's a lot of ways to keep the volume down, and the technology is pretty good, and I'll be making use of it. So I want to keep the neighbors happy.
Mr. Chair, my recommendation would be in this particular case. I don't recommend, this is just my personal view, that I'd be willing to approve today, but I'd like a condition in there that we have some sort of report back later as to a decibel test after we go live, something similar. And you weren't a part of this that we did with Fort Hill, where we approved, and then after the fact we had decibel test and just some sort of follow-up condition.
Does the company you're dealing with, do they think they're going to be able to make it so that it won't be there won't be sound bleeding through at all? Or
So I haven't had a meeting with them yet.
okay.
I was looking at what services they provide, and I've been in contact with them, but I'd like to meet with them, my architect and contractor, all at once, so that we can work together in the space and make sure that we are keeping everybody happy. And also, I don't want to have people to hear the rooms next to them either. So it's like, it's good for me to provide for customer service reasons as well. So,
Trying to think of a way we can condition language like no noise or minimal noise, something like that. That would allow someone to have complete just like that. Yeah. Or just nuisance, like a neighbor can just make a nuisance.
Yeah. Oh, if they have too much noise.
Anybody from the public, comments or questions?
Okay, I was just gonna respond to, so there's a condition I could put in there, because we dealt with this with the one in Northampton. They had to go through a full third-party analysis to comply, but a condition we put in there was just saying that they have to, there's a state regulation, I forget, it's CMR something,
Yeah.
that just says what the conditions are for just a broad noise ordinance throughout the state. I could just state in the condition that must comply with that, that ordinance. I can get the link to you folks to review that. If you folks approve it, I can send that. You can have the chance to sign off on that.
It'd also be good to know, where it is that we'll be measuring,
Right.
decibel level, how close to the neighbor's walls, like from the street, how far from the windows.
We'd leave that sort of thing to experts. And I think that what we're going with now is just kind of what Jesse's suggesting is a general provision, and Dylan's suggesting to comply with Massachusetts state law.
Yeah, we could do something like that. That's because we dealt with that, dealing with like the, like Chem Metal over there, right?
Over where?
Chem Metal.
Chem Metal, yeah, you weren't here for
Yeah, I
that.
think it was before my time.
It was a similar thing where we had a condition, I think, that found sort of the state noise ordinance.
Yeah, for the exterior blower.
Yeah. I don't know. I honestly don't know how that plays out when we're talking about two. Really applicable or
The thing is that we always have this. That is, it's nice to mention it so people see it in there, but it's also a level of redundancy we're trying to,
Right.
if you apply to the state law, whether you say it or not.
right.
So
There's also, part of it is also the landlord has written into, the lease of the neighbors, because they were, sharing a wall with a music store, that they had to be okay with having, noise coming from there. So,
Two neighbors on either side.
we have the Water's Fine, and Wedgeworks.
both relatively quiet applications.
Yeah. But also not, those are very late. The hour should be somewhat helpful.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
both
but you don't know
close
how
at
they're gonna
5
be.
or
There's
6.
might be a new business going in the future. I've never done an entertainment
Yeah.
situation before. What do we do with things like smoking? I mean, I'm sure they're not gonna smoke in the rooms, right? So they have to go outside to smoke? Is that something we have jurisdiction?
That's just state law.
It's just state law, okay, all right.
So, he's referenced tonight too, that he's gonna be selling some non-alcoholic drinks and snacks.
Yep.
That's all gonna be like health code. They're gonna have to
Yep.
do all the licensing for that. I think there's some reference to the signage in the application. That also is separate from us. I thought we have
Yep.
signage regs.
And sure, you have access to like the dumpsters and stuff for your typical trash. There aren't any, so
Okay,
you're,
so what are you doing for the trash?
I'll be using waste management or whoever, whatever service will come by, on a weekly or bi-weekly.
Okay.
I really don't know what which services are available, but I'll be using a service. I won't be taking garbage
Okay.
myself.
And there's no parking requirement because it's downtown business. It sounds like from the application that when you can't use on-street parking for any of the sort of loading or unloading of stuff, you've got a rear spot. Is that right? They give you
There is,
access for deliveries. Which I think really covers pretty much everything.
You get the sense that a lot of this hasn't really formed yet.
yeah.
It's a good idea. You
First, early on, yes, I didn't want to get too far and then not get a permit for it.
Yeah,
So,
it's always hard to go, which is the cart, which is the horse.
So a lot of what Jesse said, I would take to heart, trash, the smoking, all this such good stuff that you should be paying attention to later on in the health departments.
Yeah, I don't even know what you need for that, but
Yeah, I actually, we did a meeting the other day, Dylan was there, where I spoke to most of, the departments in the city, police, fire, I did speak to, I didn't really speak to public or to, health because they wanted to just hear from you right before we opened, because, that's kind of the last, I don't know which products I'm gonna stock or anything.
yeah, that sounds like it's not a kitchen and things like that, which I think makes it a lot less complicated.
Are you gonna be recording any of this stuff and giving them as
No.
CD or a streaming file or whatever of their
No,
songs?
no, it's just,
Okay. It's just for them to come in and have fun.
I pay not to.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so other than a condition to comply with the state sound noise ordinance.
Yeah, I can't think of
Any
anything
other
else.
conditions or concerns from board members?
Harry, anything?
I motion to approve the site plan approval, for 24 Cottage Street.
I'll second that.
With the aforementioned condition.
Sound, I'll second that.
Did we, I don't know if there's any, but did we want to take public
I
comment?
asked for
Sorry.
a comment, but
Yeah, he
there
did.
was no.
My mistake.
All right, voting to approve the special permit, site plan approval with the condition. All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstaining. All right.
Thank you.
Good luck. All right, moving right along, continue public hearing for things here, 35 Pleasant Street. Welcome back.
How are you?
How are you?
I'm fine. So for the record, Jess Fire from the Berkshire Design Group here on behalf of Norwood Properties and, Kevin Perrier, as noted previously. Let's see. Can I share, some of the updates, but I can, sort of fill you in as to what, what's transpired since the last meeting. Conservation Commission meeting, we had another, I think our third hearing last night. We did make some concessions on lighting, sort of, impacts they're gonna study. We did get comments, at the end of the day yesterday from, Diane regarding the porous asphalt. So those were sort of formalized comments. We've had some discussions with her previously, but we do need to just respond back to those, and there was questions, and so we do need to get back to those. My sense was, generally she didn't, dismiss the system. It's a valid system. It's more just working through some of the details and clarifying some of the calculations and numbers and whatnot. So there's that.
When are you going back before them? Sorry.
Yeah.
When are you back before the Concom?
The 14th, I think. Yeah, we should be able to respond pretty quickly. And then, I think, otherwise, some of the other updates that I presented to them, regarded additional plantings, some other mitigation measures that will come up, in some of this, updated presentation, which I can bring up and just sort of walk through the updates from a, site plan standpoint. I will touch on some of the other, there was, a request about HOA and just understanding the maintenance a little bit more, understanding a little bit about that slope and its protection, and then, particularly related to traffic, just an update on some of that information. So, let's see. Anyway, okay. So, again, 35 Pleasant Street, the home of the former Catholic Church. There's a preschool that operates out of the site now, in the center of the site, 2 buildings. Just some images of the existing site, preschool operating out of this building in the back, and one of these buildings as an office. Existing site, really, it's I think an 11-acre site or so, 10 acres, but this front portion is really the only developable portion. The rest of it drops off pretty quickly, and is within resource areas. So the project proposed demolition of all the structures except for the church that would be renovated. This would include a total of 9 new units in the church and 33 additional residential units in 7 buildings spread out throughout the remainder of the site. Just clarifying some of the parking, we are, in excess of the requirement. There was 84 spaces required. We had 94. I know there was a little bit of back and forth at the last meeting, but I did recount those. So we've got 10 additional spaces with those expansions that I alluded to previously. Talking to some of the updates that we presented to the Conservation Commission last night, and in thinking about a creative way to provide some barrier along the top of that slope, is rather than put a fence or chain link, is that a row of shrubs to help both stabilize the top of that slope, plant that with other native grass species. And so shown across the back of this slope now, at the top of that bank is a essentially a hedgerow, but it's made up of 3 or 4 different, native species, and then surrounded by, other conservation mix to help stabilize that and provide, both a visual barrier, but also a physical barrier for those residents. And then also included, we can post some small, signs on existing trees. There's a couple of locations, I think, directly behind the units, in this general, sort of service area and open parking area. And then again, behind these couple of units, just try to, call attention to it, but not make it too, obtrusive and noticeable. So that was an update to the conservation plan, but something that, you folks were both interested in as well. Yeah.
Top left corner, is that an example of the sign?
Of the sign, yes. And there was a little bit of a presentation, a breakdown of the proposed phasing plan, specifically as it related to sort of the existing stormwater system. I can walk through this, but essentially the idea is that what you see underlain in sort of solid hatch here is the existing sort of paved area. There are buildings in this location and in this location along this on this edge here. Phase 1, as we noted before, would be those western units. Phase 2 would be renovation of the church. They can utilize that existing, driveway. That paved area now is access into the site. This would be cut out and removed and prepped for the building construction. The last thing they would do is put in that porous asphalt system for that driveway and then move on to, I imagine there might be a breathing period after those first and second phases just to sort of assess the absorption rate and market and all of that. Once they launch into phase 3, which is these 2 building blocks up along Pleasant Street, again, the existing driveway could be retained as access, construction access. This could remain until these buildings are constructed. Eventually that would all come out to make way for those buildings. And then phase 4 would be an eastern part of the site. And at that time, the final drainage system, garage, all of that would be removed. That area would be restored, and that would be completion of the project. So as each phase moves forward, there's going to be less impacts, less drainage going to that existing system. That was part of the discussion last night. So just trying to make that apparent. And then we did sort of provide a general construction sequence based on what we anticipate now. And again, a lot of things subject to change, but that's generally the general approach to the overall project.
And do we have a copy of that? This new plan?
I don't think
Okay.
the planning board does, so I will absolutely include that. Yeah, the plan.
This was, not any documents submitted to the COMCOM have been uploaded to the website. You can access them through the.
Yeah, I just want to make sure planning department and planning board also has that in our.
Yeah, because I've never seen these. Yeah.
Yeah, so this was just hot off the press last night.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'll get you.
Like our special permits incorporate all the latest plans, whatnot, so this way it's in the file.
Understood. Yep. I think the remainder of these were just some of the previous plans. I would, let's see, let me just do this one first because this is a little bit easier. So just talking about the HOA, and just some assurances that, maintenance is incorporated. As Kevin had noted earlier, just we haven't, he hasn't advanced things with his attorneys in developing that HOA to that point yet, but what we did provide is, what was included for the operation and maintenance plans and stormwater report, which is pretty specific both during construction, but particularly post-construction. Both the responsible property owner, maintenance responsibility until such time that HOA takes over. There are a couple of maintenance companies in there that are suggested as contacts for maintenance. And then obviously a pretty thorough description of what's intended for the porous system. So that would get incorporated into the HOA, just like the steeple, whatever they are, the birds.
So the Swift.
Yes, sorry. But yeah, any of that stuff, I think the Conservation Commission also has, lighting, a couple of other specific items that are going to get incorporated into the HOA, but we imagine this would get.
Okay, yeah, and I'm curious to see how they address, otherwise we'll just do what we've done before. I think sometimes you said that one of the conditions is, an HOA agreement, think we're done where it's approved by council, but like actually outlining specific requirements. 'Cause I think one of the things that's going to be key here is sort of ongoing obligations for maintenance and replacement once it's all privately owned, and then also some sort of teeth for the city in the case that they don't, and what we can do to help the city get in there and do something. So,
And then, so lastly, is just an update on traffic, what we were able to find out. And so it took a little bit more work than we anticipated. We went through, I think, 5 local firms, and either the project was too small or they didn't have the capacity. I did reach out to a traffic consultant we have used out in Andover, but this is their specialty. They're traffic engineers and consultants. They had the ability to, review our report, the data, produce their own report based on, our information, provided a number of comments and their own supporting, supplemental data to back up, what they were referencing. So I can run through those general comments. There were, I think, 5, comments generally that were in the document. Comment 1 was generally that they agreed with the methodology that we had used, or that approach in using the IT numbers and the square footages and those. The one thing they did note is that we had referenced the 10th edition. There has since been an 11th edition. So those were updated in that. Also with that edition update, the multifamily housing component of it got broken out a little bit differently. So there is now 2 separate categories. There's a single family attached housing and a multifamily housing low rise, which is what we used previously. So they just separated out the numbers, assuming the church would fall under that first use of single family attached housing because of the number of units. So it's basically the same chart, a little bit different numbers because of the newer edition and slightly different categories. So those were the two primary comments. In looking at the traffic comparisons, existing and proposed, mostly came up with the same results that we had mentioned, in that, given the church use, that it's a reduction. Even without the church, that in all cases except for the Sunday, all of the numbers are reduced with the residential use compared to the preschool, the school that's there now, and those pick up and drop off numbers. So Sunday was the one, obviously anomaly with a church being the type of traffic that generates, but in all cases, all the other numbers, even without the church figures, declined. Comment 3 was talking about the existing traffic on the adjacent roads, on nearby roads. They did review some of the same DOT traffic data. They said that the estimated Saturday trip traffic on Pleasant Street results in a slight increase of 2.2%. But that would not be readily apparent over existing conditions, and that on all other days of the week and during peak hours, the project will be significantly less impact than the existing uses that occupy the project site. So I think given the pickup and drop off periods and those, intense peak hours, that, the residential traffic spread out throughout the day it's a much less intense use. And then comment 4 just agreed that there's adequate sight lines in excess of 500 feet approaching and exiting the driveways. And then comment 5 had said that just further review of crash data indicated that there have been no additional crashes since the data that we brought up, which is that one in that time period. So there's a lot of other data in there. I just pulled out some of the highlights of their comments, and just was appreciative of them to be able to.
I'm assuming we don't have anyone here to answer questions.
There isn't. No, I couldn't. Yeah, it was hard to.
Sorry.
This is a brand new study, is it not?
This is what?
This is brand new.
This is as of yesterday. Yes.
All right, this isn't something that was complied from like 6 months to a year ago and then thrown together, right?
No. I mean, this is
up to the snuff.
Well, the count, so, I mean, there's no current count, so that's one of the things.
Yeah, like, I was reading some of that. And,
That being said, and you just referred to, I think in comment 3, there was a study done in 2024.
Yep.
And that some of the data machinery appeared to be broken because there was one day that had a very low count, it was like 70 or something.
Yeah.
But they basically, from what I took from it, got like a day and a half of good data and used one of the days, which I think was Saturday, to really assess everything.
It looks like it's a Tuesday, 'cause it was
Tuesday.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Apparently you throw out Mondays and Fridays,
Yes.
and Wednesday was faulty, so it's one day in November of 2024.
It's, that was the last study done.
Right.
And it didn't indicate what for. I wasn't quite sure why that study was done. Or for whom, was it Mass DOT or?
It was collected by Mass DOT, but I don't know that it says what it's for.
It's interesting. But that's the data to work with without spending for a full,
Right.
which is a significant burden. That's pretty much, I think, the best you're going to get. Personally, I found that document to really help solidify the numbers. They did make some changes. They updated it. They made some comments. And I felt that, this is me personally, that was a very well-informed document. For me, it was exact and representative. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still curious how long we can use the church as an existing use, because I don't know exactly how long it's been, but I know it's been a while. I'm not sure. It does seem.
Well, again, I just, and I can, talk through the figures, but even removing the church, as I pointed out, with the exception
No, I
of
understand.
Sunday, it's still a reduction, in peak hours and average daily trips over,
Yep, I
the
understand.
existing use.
Which is when you say the existing use, what do you mean by that?
The church, or the school,
Just the.
The daycare.
just the daycare. So if you take the church out of it completely, with the exception of Sundays, it's a reduction in, peak hour traffic and average daily trips. And really, I guess, just thinking about it further, just from an objective standpoint, given the neighborhood business zoning district, this is probably about the lowest intensive use that, the site could have.
It's also, I mean, we need housing, and I don't know how you got housing without adding a car and a half per unit base.
Yeah, and I feel like when we were actually at the site visit, there was a significant amount of children there, and there was a lot of pickups. It happened to be, in the afternoon, so people were picking up their children. But I mean, there was a significant amount of traffic there at the time.
Yeah, we think the weekends will be totally different, but I think weekdays it's also less. Generally those daycare centers are peak moments of drop off and pick up.
Absolutely.
I think there'll be some rush hour from a residential complex, but not the same kind of thing. But
I also don't really know a lot about traffic, but I am a professional engineer, and so I do appreciate that it is signed by a professional engineer licensed in the state of Massachusetts, and they are a traffic engineer. So that makes me feel good. And it's by a company that is a transportation engineering company, Panas and Associates. So they wouldn't put their reputation on something that wasn't true.
I think there was some question about checking the landscaping plans for.
Oh, yes. I did that also. I meant to highlight that in the plan. That Father Gilia so it's a regionally native plant.
Okay.
There is, I think the USDA put out a much more specific native plant list that goes actually by county.
Okay.
And so I went through and did update, a few of the plants to reflect, the Father Gilia used to be, this FG, so that's an Arrowwood by Burn now, and I think there was one other change, I forget what it was, but I did go through that list to make sure everything aligned. So
that.
yes, I did apologize for that.
Any other questions from the board? Any other comments or questions from the public?
Heather Wazinski, Overlook Drive. I would say the presentation of what happened at last night's COMCOM meeting was rather optimistic and not necessarily accurate. The porous asphalt continues to be a big problem for the COMCOM. They're concerned about whether it's going to be an effective stormwater management system. And they are not only asking for a response to what the city engineer brought forth, but then after that's done, which will be hopefully for the 14th, there'll be a peer review of that. Currently, porous asphalt is only approved for small storms in Massachusetts by regulation. And it appears that the porous asphalt also won't meet the nutrient removal requirement in our city ordinances. And so by itself, it likely won't be a functional stormwater system for us. So I think that's important to relay because it was a very different discussion that we had last night.
Really, we defer on the stormwater plan to them, so they will address all of that and then.
I understand that.
Accordingly, but thank you.
I understand that. There was a continued discussion of the stability of the slope, and they did raise some questions about the geostability of the slope and whether there would be some assessment of that independent of the developer. There raised some significant concerns about the drainage system that's behind the garage and how that was going to be maintained during construction. That they talked about needing a functional stormwater system once the first phase was done, which changes how the phasing might need to occur. I still have some significant concerns about the traffic study. I think the discussion was that they use the numbers provided by the developer rather than obtaining their own numbers somehow. I don't think any reasonable person would suggest that putting that many units in there is going to reduce the traffic coming in and out of that over an expanded period of time, except for potentially the moments of drop off and pick up for that daycare center. And those are an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon, not Saturday and Sunday. I do believe that most people in that neighborhood are going to see an uptick in traffic and find it disruptive. We then add the uptick in traffic from all of the other developments. And I know you keep saying we need housing, but I don't think we need as much as people are suggesting that we need. And given the skewed numbers that are in our housing plan, they're counting young adults living at home with their parents as being homeless. That's how they're getting those numbers and suggesting that we need more housing than we actually need. And so I think we need not to approach this as we need housing. This is what's beneficial for the city. And we are getting to the point where it's becoming problematic, the amount of housing that we have, and the roads cannot handle this level of traffic. The wait on Northampton Street sometimes backs people up from the Rotary all the way halfway to River Valley and waiting in that traffic. So I think we have a huge problem and we're adding more to it with each approved development. I think we're looking at least 6 to 8 weeks before the stormwater is potentially be approved. And that stability of that slope is a real problem. I think, we could be 5-10 years down the road and having a building going down into the Manhattan if that slope is not truly stable. And given the issue around that drainage pipe, I think we've seen a lot of instability in that slope. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a hand raised online, I think.
All right, please, you should be able to speak now.
Yes, thank you. Felicia Jadzak, Federal Street. I'm also the Precinct 2 City Councilor, in which this development is located. I'm just here to basically say or share some thoughts that I've been getting from some constituents who've been reaching out to me regarding this development. First, I fully wholeheartedly agree that we do need more housing in the city. So on that angle, I am very much in support of this development and very excited to see this continue to progress. what I am hearing from constituents is continued concerns. It sounds like some of them have been addressed, so I won't go through all of them, but the two primary concerns that I do continue to hear are first, again, with traffic. I think that Kathy mentioned a few of the concerns around that, so I won't repeat all of that, but I would like to advocate for an independent study done with new numbers and not just numbers that the developer is providing, because I do agree. I think that there is going to be a much more impactful impact, for lack of a better word, with this development coming in. I am also curious because I know that some of you on the board have mentioned you were able to do a site visit when there was pickup or drop off happening with the existing daycare. And I would be curious, just with that alone, to know if the number of families that are currently enrolled in the daycare at all correspond to the number of units that are being proposed for this development. So that's a sort of side question there. And this may have been answered before, so apologies if that's already been covered. But so just again, would like to advocate for an independent study because this is going to have a huge impact on this neighborhood. And the other note that I'll make, which I've been hearing from folks, is that there seems to be a continued I'm not sure if it's intentional or not, but a continued overlook of communication with neighbors, and some folks who attended past meetings or other neighbors have just not been able to really get any information or have not been reached out to by the developer. So just would like to continue to encourage the developer to make sure that you're touching base with the impacted neighbors for this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Just on the issue of numbers for the school, the information we have is that there's 110 students, I think, currently enrolled in the Roots daycare.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other public comments or questions? We obviously are going to have to continue this anyways for the Concom. But any other comments or questions from board members or any other things we want to make sure we get for next week?
Yes, I have one. I think there's a lot of good points being brought up. And obviously, as you said, we have to wait for the Concom on issues of stability and the porous pavement. Those are big issues I think we're all concerned with, but ultimately they'll decide and we'll follow the lead. With traffic, that's a big one for us, and a lot of people are concerned about it. But I just want to reiterate my point. The comment was made, and I think it's the understanding that it's the developer's numbers. Well, it was the developer giving us a document initially that contains the ITE numbers, so they stated, which has now been verified, as you said, by a professional, another party who's putting their name and liability on it. So it's not the developer's numbers, it's the ITE numbers that are coming in. I feel very comfortable with the traffic study at this point. I didn't before because I'm not an expert and I needed an expert to vet it. I've got that now. So I want to state that for everyone here. Those numbers that they're using are a standard way in which these things are done without actually paying for the full amount of testing where you put out the strips and do counts of cars that go by. And even those aren't always 100% accurate. It is a big burden on the developer, especially on a project like this, which isn't our most massive project by far, to do that type of study. So as a board member, I'm very comfortable with what's been provided with traffic. And I feel like we've gone above and beyond by having someone look at it and put their stamp of approval on it. It's a third party in a profession.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
I mean, I guess the only comment that still I go back to is the stormwater and the porous pavement. And this is a conservation commission.
It's not just the Conservation Commission. We can also, I mean,
Yeah, but there's
for 100%.
there's plenty of options for underground storage. I mean, there's so many ways you can have the vortex catch basins. There's so many things you can do where it doesn't have to discharge off the back and erode the soil, the slope anymore, and you've got plenty of room on site.
Well, and the major issue here is that there are no connections to the street either.
Right. But you
So
can do it all on
our
site.
two options, our only option is to discharge to the back of the property where that existing outlet is.
Or underground storage.
But we can't provide enough storage to contain, I mean, we manage a 100-year storm, but any stormwater system designed to the 100-year storm includes an overflow somewhere. It's just that it's the rip trap thing, it's got a pipe outlet, it's got something, and we have nowhere. That's the unique thing about this site is everything discharges into riverfront on that slope. So, the goal was to take that away, and we have no other options other than try to contain everything on site. And so the advantage with the porous system on this site, particularly with the sandier soils, is that we can hold a bunch of we can store, you know, a ton of water under that system and in the infiltration trenches that are designed. So that's, to your point, that's what we're trying to do.
Yep.
And there really aren't, you know, those types of systems require a bunch of, you know, structures and underground, you know, chambers and plastic things that, you know, this really does the same thing, just without all those liners and chambers and, you know, contraptions. I mean, I appreciate it's a new system or a new type of managing stormwater, but you know, we have had success on it before. You know, I don't have any concerns, you know, advocating for its use. I don't think it's an appropriate thing for industrial sites or sites that get, you know, heavy truck traffic, but this is, you know, a relatively small residential development with, you know, passenger vehicles. So it, you know, it has been, you know, it's a proven thing. So that's, anyway, just to your point, that was part of the stormwater, you know, strategy, is to try to figure out which is better, to hold everything on site, or try to, you know, argue that we should retain that outlet somehow and stabilize that slope, and which just didn't, from our standpoint, seem like a very good idea. So,
Yeah, and so an option might be, you might end up having to take a unit out and put a detention pond in there at the end of the day, but that's the Conservation Commission to decide, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're doing a much deeper dive on it at least.
Yep, which is good.
A couple other ones. We've talked a little bit before about a snow removal plan that I think was a little bit more up in the air, but have you settled on that, or something official from where you're planning on putting the snow?
No, we can, I apologize, and we can certainly put together a plan for next.
I think it's just, I think it's on this site, it would be good to have a plan beforehand instead of sort of figuring out when the first snow comes.
Yep. No, I apologize.
No, that's okay. And the other one, we got another letter from Robert Parker, who's at 22 Pleasant, and there's been some confusion about which property across the street he's at. I actually drove by and looked. Can you remind me again, that first entrance, that is going to move a little bit, right?
This shifts, yes, the first entrance shifts a little bit to
away from the church.
Yes.
How far are we talking about?
It's not much, like 20 feet. I was looking at it.
10, but I couldn't figure it out from the drawings because
It appears, the way that it looks like on Google Earth, that the new entrance should be directly across the street from the entrance to that beauty parlor across the way.
like the parking lot, that right? Like if you can you scroll down a little bit?
Just scroll
there,
down
Jeff?
a bit.
Yeah, so like
Here's an entrance to, right here.
and I think that it's the house to the left.
It
It's
is.
actually Mr. Parker's.
This building here.
No, he's to our left. Yeah,
Okay.
that one. So I think that will, I mean, obviously there's gonna be light spray when people come in and out all along Pleasant Street, and that's sort of the nature of it, but I was getting a little nervous because we misidentified his house the first time, and I do think if either of those driveways were coming right into somebody's living room, that could become homes.
Back, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that looks like that should be not a direct hit, and hopefully it won't be too, especially with some of the
agree.
plantings and stuff. Hopefully that will address that.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff, so it sounds like there might be a difference of opinion about whether or not July 14th is gonna be a vote for Concom or end of the road. I don't know what you wanna do for coming back here.
So, yeah.
Okay, yeah,
So just to clarify sort of the order of operations here, they had suggested a third-party review, the sort of the porous asphalt. You know, one of my points is that it's a pretty prescribed system. You know, if you have the right soil conditions, how you build up those layers is pretty prescribed in the handbook. And so, you know, somebody can certainly do a whole stormwater, you know, analysis or review of the project. It was just a question of, you know, clarifying what the review was going to entail. Some of that would be dependent on our responses to DPW, to Diane's review. And so some of those are related to, you know, depth to groundwater and separation. And so I think we just need to, you know, get all on the same page with her to clarify, you know, what needs to be, above the 3-foot groundwater separation for the city standards, and what qualifies, you know, what we're calling for, and including for infiltration for the stormwater calculations. There are a number of trenches around the homes that collect roof water, but those aren't, you know, at least in terms of the stormwater numbers, aren't used for the infiltration calculation, if that makes sense, because it's a little bit different. So anyway, I think we just need to clarify some of that stuff with her, which may or may not, you know, satisfy a lot of her concerns, because it seemed like most of it was just relative to groundwater. She did have some concerns about the slope. I think we can talk about that. But yeah, I don't, you know.
So, I mean, I've said before, right, I don't mind coming back on
Yep.
the 15th and hearing what Concom has done and reviewing that. You know, this is one of these projects that has a lot of public interest and participation, and so I don't want to get to the 15th and have you say, hey, Concom didn't do anything. Are we coming in just to talk about the snow removal plan and follow up with some things? So like, and then have to have either people show up and we're continuing until August or not. So I guess I'll defer to you a little bit on that. If you think that the 15th will be productive, I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, it's the first one in August.
I'd like to throw a little wrinkle into that, if you may.
Please.
So one of the requests that we heard tonight is something that is always meaningful to this board, and that's about communication with the neighbors. This is a plea. We can't make you communicate with your neighbors, but this board is always very impressed when that happens. I strongly suggest that you hold some kind of meeting with them. And I know that you can't do everything that they're going to ask. It never works out that way. It's a negotiation and it's a relationship building. But if you can find a way to hold some sort of forum where you can invite them and bring them in and just listen to their concerns and talk to them, and maybe there's some things you can do. That dialogue means a lot to us. And I strongly ask that you at least attempt that before our next meeting.
Yeah, and the abutters. I mean, it just makes them come to the meeting with support instead of all these.
I couldn't agree more with you, and I will talk to the opponent and see what we can manage. But yeah, it's unfortunately out of my hands, but I couldn't agree with you more. So that's
Why I threw that in now is because the time it takes to schedule that and hold it impacts when.
So just, I think, I guess my one caution, Jesse, would be that, just, we would need to get responses to the city and then responses back and just understand that.
It
So
seems like it's a tight window.
that's,
It seems to me like the first meeting in August might be a better plan.
because it took us a month or more to get comments from her initially, so it may take a little bit longer than anticipated.
I think that makes sense. I mean, if you wanted to push it, I would, but I think it makes sense to our first meeting.
What date is that? Do we have it?
No.
August 5th, Tuesday, August 5th.
Yeah.
For the wrong year.
Yep, I'm seeing the 5th as well.
I motion to continue the special permit for 35 Pleasant Street to August 5th at 6 o'clock.
Seconded.
Hold on one second here.
That's all right.
We can close it.
We can hold the vote, yeah.
There does seem to be some confusion as to who is going to look at the stability of that slope. It's unclear to me that the Conservation Commission sees it as their issue or their responsibility, and so it would be helpful to clarify who is really going to address whether that slope is stable or not, so that somebody does.
Well, they have a very tight jurisdiction, and
They do.
so I would say if they don't, then it will fall to us, and we are not going to vote until they're done with their work.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if for some reason we need to,
It might be worth having the staff clarify to make sure that someone's going to address the slope so that you know for your next meeting whether you do.
I mean, we have had some discussions with the applicant about that at these hearings, about the slope and the concerns about the slope. We have not had like an analysis done by a third party or anything. I'm not sure that we would. But yeah, I mean, I think if Concom thinks that we need more that's outside the jurisdiction, then we can certainly take that into account.
Okay.
We're
Well,
gonna
make
wait
sure
until
somebody
they
understood
cover
that
it, and
was
then
gonna
we'll see the
own it.
results. And if they don't cover it, we'll do what we feel is right.
Yeah, so
And then just as long as, before we take the vote, just so I'm sure we've got everything, I added to the list as well. Provide an update, after the Concom meeting on the 14th to you folks.
Yep.
Much like I did with last time. I know they'd mentioned, Concom had some concerns about lighting throughout the site that goes outside of their jurisdiction. They'd like.
they sent that. Yeah, that was helpful.
To weigh in on that.
Did you get that email from Concom, or I guess it was the conservation agent about the lighting? I assume there's no objections to any of that. Okay, good.
That's the amber lighting.
Yeah.
And just so I have it here, so, we want any submissions to the Conservation Commission, also submit those to the Planning Board. Just generally anything where the packets are going over 70, 80 pages, I usually don't print those out.
Yeah.
Do we want the applicant to bring in any hard copies, or we're okay keeping
No, I
those
think we're
over?
good with the digital.
And then we want to see, some type of HOA agreement, a little bit more in there.
I don't know that we need to see a draft of that. I think that we are gonna have to craft at least broad parameters for conditions in the special permit that will have to be included in. We can probably look at some prior decisions about what we've done when we haven't approved an HOA agreement at the meeting, but deferred that to later.
Okay.
You and I can talk about that problem.
I can look at Stepler as
Yeah.
well. I think it's probably a good similar case.
That's perfect. I was thinking about that as we were saying it earlier, to make sure that the language that's in there, because we don't know what the exact HOA language is gonna be, states that they have to follow a maintenance plan that's acceptable. There were recommendations that I think it had to be cleaned twice a year and et cetera, et cetera. But without being too specific, we need to be specific. That's a bit of a change.
Yeah, I think we can walk that line.
Okay.
And then the snow removal plan.
We got the snow removal print, and then we're just waiting on Concom for the stability and porous pavement, which, yeah, that's gonna be that. We'll find that out after the 14th.
All right. Voting to continue,
Motion on that floor.
voting to continue to, was it August 5th? We're gonna continue August 5th. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining. All right.
And there was.
See you back in 2 weeks. Thank you all.
Just a quick question, just while I've got all of you here. Just an example, the last two site plan approvals were my first site plan approvals with you folks. I know my conversation with James, where he was saying, what does he need for his application? My answer to that was, well, I'm not too sure what the board's gonna want for a site plan approval. My recommendation to him was going a little bit lean, prepare for this possibly being continued if you guys have specific things, rather than him trying to do, if you look at what it actually requires or asks for in the application process, packet, it's definitely a lot more than you folks would have needed. That level of detail for that scale of project, would you folks like to see more detail? Kind of what's that?
I mean, my approach is always that, the ordinance tells you what you need and we don't have to have all of it.
Yeah.
But as much as you don't have to put that together for a site plan approval, you do run the risk of then not getting it done at this meeting. So some of that is just sort of appetite for risk by an applicant. I think that, they're technically, you don't even have the ability to waive any of that, only we do. So you might have to get to this meeting to request a waiver of some of those requirements. You're coming back. So I think that's sort of what I would put it on them to sort of figure out what they want to do and how much they want to do.
Okay. Yeah, that's the approach that I took. I just want to make sure I'm not bringing these incomplete nothings to you guys where you're saying, well,
I mean, that one was a little close, but it's downtown business. There's not much to it. Like all the considerations under the ordinance for site plan approval don't apply, basically, like 9/10 of them. So there's not a whole lot to look at.
It's all sound.
Right. But for other things, I think that would probably see you more in the application. So,
Well said.
I have one thing too.
yes.
I am relocating to the UK November 1st for work. Yeah. So my last meeting will be probably the second meeting in the last meeting in October. So just want to let you know.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Good opportunity. It's a great opportunity. So
Yeah, you can always get on Zoom though,
yeah, right. Exactly at 2 a.m.
It'd be great.
Whenever midnight over there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, it's permanent. Yeah. I mean, I might come back in 5 years, but it's permanent for all intents and purposes.
yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, that's too bad.
It is, but it's a great career opportunity, so I gotta take it.
Second my motion.
Harry James and I till the end of time. All right,
Motion to adjourn.
all those in favor? Aye. Thank you all.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.